Thank you, Sam. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. The plan for today is to give an overview of the case study of the 107.5 megawatt gas-to-power IPP plant we commissioned last July, providing power for Eskom and EDM. Eskom in South Africa, EDM is the national utility of Mozambique. The plant is located in Mozambique, and then it's a cross-border IPP project. Subsequent to this presentation, things that aren't actually captured in it, I'd like to thank the organisers and the judges. We actually won the finest fast-track power award last night at the gala dinner for this project, delivered in less than 4 months. And also subsequent to this presentation, you may have seen in the press, we've recently signed another project on the same power plant using the same gas in Mozambique, now providing a further 115 megawatts for NAM Power and EDM. So in total, I know all the figures in here will talk about 110 megawatts, but it's actually in total 225 megawatts now installed in Mozambique. So a little bit about Aggreko. We essentially specialise in providing fast-track and interim solutions, either additional power or temperature control solutions for our customers. We have now today actually over just under 6,000 staff located around the world in 165 permanent locations to make sure we can service our customers quickly around the world in 39 different countries. Last year, we operated in just over now 100 countries, either with, that's the project side of the business where we don't have a permanent location, but we can come in and do the project for an interim period of time and then decommission at the end. We have now just over $3 billion worth of fleet, and that equates to about 8 gigawatts of fleet and generators, gas, diesel and HFO generators strategically located around the world so we can move them very quickly to wherever the need might be. Again, that figure is slightly out of date, 2011. It's $2.5 billion in 2012. And we're a British company, despite the strange name, which has Dutch origins. We're very much a British company, headquartered in Scotland, where we still manufacture all our equipment, and are listed on the London Stock Exchange as a FTSE 100 company. So some of the industries we serve. Utility is obviously the one we're going to talk about today. A good example of how we've been providing interim solutions for utilities is Kenya, where we've been working on and off for about the last 10 years. Obviously, Kenya is very reliant on hydro. When the rain doesn't come in, we can go in and provide additional power for an interim period, ensuring that security of supply remains and GDP growth is not affected by a shortage of capacity. Mining, often mines are obviously located in relatively remote locations. They're waiting for grid access. We can come in and allow those mines to start producing early whilst they're waiting for that permanent grid power to come online. Manufacturing, any process manufacturing where the cost of lost production is very great, we can come in and make sure we provide security of supply if there are any issues on their permanent supply. Oil and gas, both on and offshore, we've been working across the world for a number of years, over 30 years now, where reliability and obviously health and safety is absolutely critical. If you're on a rig offshore and the power goes out, that is incredibly dangerous for the staff on that rig. And finally, events, and obviously the well-known event that we recently did in South Africa was the World Cup and the Confederations Cup before that in 2010. Obviously a critical industry where any outage in power costs broadcasters and sponsors billions of dollars, and there are usually very severe penalties associated to any interruption in the power supply. Some of our projects across the world, and this doesn't include North America or Europe on this slide, but we have numerous projects across the world on all continents. Some of the well-known projects that have happened recently, obviously Japan, where we still have 200 megawatts in operation, and that obviously was following the tsunami. Vale in Mozambique, Anglo-American and BHP in South Africa. You know, the Presidential and Ryder Cup big events in America last year, which I'm very proud as a European to be talking about. We powered there. So, what about ourselves in Africa? We've partnered with Shanduka, the leading BEE organisation, for about the last 7 years and have worked incredibly successfully with them. And we have a long-term joint venture arrangement with them. We're very proud of the fact that 89% of our African workforce are locally employed, and to date we've delivered something like 40,000 hours of training for our African workforce since we've been in the country 20 odd years ago. Today, we have just over 1.6 gigawatt on hire, in operation on the continent of Africa. And a nice, interesting stat I heard is after the Chinese, Aggreko has actually installed more megawatts than anybody else in Africa in the last 10 years. Okay, a lot of those plants are then decommissioned to move somewhere else, but in terms of megawatts installed, we're just behind the Chinese. So, to the project, just as an overview, we essentially are using gas in Mozambique, the land in Mozambique, the concession from the Minister of Energy in Mozambique. The power plant is very much a Mozambique power plant, and we have partnered with EDM as the host utility to be able to set up that power plant there. We then use the EDM existing transmission network to transmit the power from our power plant, which is just on the border of South Africa, Rosana Garcia. It's not far from Kamati Port over the border. And we transmit the power to the border of South Africa and Mozambique. And then Eskom are obviously the off-taker there. If you take the Namibia project that I was talking about earlier, very similar setup. We basically, with EDM, get the power to the border of Mozambique, South Africa, and then Eskom are involved in getting the power, wheeling the power from their border to the border of South Africa and Namibia. It's really using the Southern African power pool to all its strengths, essentially. So what were some of the challenges that we faced along the way? Short timescales, that's the obvious one. And I think where gas projects are possibly different than other types of fuel projects, you're always kind of hostage to the gas supply. There are definite long stop dates that will not change. If you miss that start date, then it just eats into your project time. You can't just push it out all the time. So we knew that the timescales were incredibly tight, and we needed to make the decision prior to entering this whether we wanted to take on those timescales. The civil works, I think, for our team probably were one of the most challenging. It was a very remote location. Didn't have any access with roads that all needed to be constructed. There was no infrastructure around, be that substations, etc. The ground in Mozambique, if you know that part of the world at all, is incredibly hard and very hard to obviously lay underground gas pipe work. And then the interesting one, which I don't think we've encountered many times before, is we had to do landmine clearance, obviously, with Mozambique. So there were some pretty interesting civil works required. As I mentioned, normally our projects, we come in and we connect to an existing substation, whereas in this case, there was no existing substation. The closest transmission network was the existing Mfuleni-Kamati Port line about 1.5 kilometers away, but there was nothing for us to immediately and quickly access. And although there is a pipeline that runs from the Tamane gas fields in Mozambique all the way down into South Africa, our power plant is located approximately 1.2 kilometers away from that pipeline. So we still needed to put in quite a bit of gas infrastructure to make it a reality. And logistics, that's always the challenge. We had to mobilize equipment, all in coordination, have it come into Mozambique at roughly the same time so we could do the importation. 500 odd containers were coming in, so it was a logistical challenge getting it through customs, etc., as you can imagine. So just kind of delving in now to some of the details of the plant. You can see, apologies for the hazy sketch there, but that's essentially our plant, and then the substation in the background top right is what we created, and then running just over those hills in the background was the existing Mfuleni Kamati Port transmission line. And this looked like a complete greenfield site before we started. So the first thing, as I mentioned, mobilising equipment. It was coming from 4 different locations: Rotterdam, Dubai, Singapore and the UK. And as I mentioned, it all needed to be coordinated, those various different work streams, to make sure the equipment was arriving in Maputo at roughly the same time, and then getting it onto site as quickly as possible. One of the differences, I guess, for us being an interim IPP here was a lot of the contracts that quite often the customer will take care of. We needed to coordinate all of that. So we had, just on the fuel supply side, and there are many other contracts behind this as well, but we had direct contracts with Sasol for the gas allocation, and then Romco and MGC for the gas transportation. All those contracts obviously needed to be negotiated in parallel and executed in parallel to make sure we weren't left carrying the baby on any of those contractual risks. As I mentioned, the gas infrastructure was required, made even more tricky by the fact that the ground being so hard, we needed to put in controlled explosions to lay the pipeline. There was an existing pipeline, still is an existing pipeline running alongside, so that needed to be managed incredibly carefully to make sure health and safety. It's very high pressure. If anything was to go wrong there, it would have been a disaster. So I'm pleased to say our engineering team managed that incredibly well. Then obviously the generation, as I mentioned, we were bringing in 500 odd different containers. All had to be mobilised, installed, commissioned in less than 4 months to make sure we kept the timings on track. And that included everything: transformers, switchgear, pipework, everything, a true turnkey package. And then the substation. This is slightly different for Aggreko. Normally, as I say, we're connecting into an existing substation, whereas in this instance, we needed to construct a 500 MVA substation, a permanent substation. I think one of the keys of the project was that substation will ultimately be handed over to EDM. And I think that really shows how an interim project such as this can have long-term benefits for the host utility and the Southern African power pool. And investing into the transmission network, albeit with an interim project, has a legacy that can go on for years. Obviously, the Southern African power pool have very strict and established guidelines, so we needed to make sure we were adhering to all of those guidelines and connecting seamlessly into the existing system, minimising any outages while we were connecting, etc. All our plants come with all the spares and consumables. We charge a price to our customer, and whatever happens, that's the price they pay. So all of our plants need to come with spares and consumables all on site to make sure, A, there's not going to be any outages, and B, there's not going to be any cost difference for our customer. And then 24/7 operations. Our staff will be on site throughout the contract duration to make sure we're offering our customer, the best possible customer service, and they will be there throughout. So some of the timelines. We signed contracts with EDM and Eskom March and April respectively, and that really gave us the green light to start going ahead and move like greased lightning. Mobilising equipment happened within 2 or 3 days afterwards. We'd already prepared all of the equipment to be mobilised. Then the site preparation and the mine clearance, as I mentioned earlier, needed to start, and that was all happening while the equipment was basically in transit from the various locations to Maputo. Then the substation, and I think one of the challenges for us is, we needed to install this substation with a 25-year mine life. It's a 25-year lifespan. It's then going to be handed over and become part of the permanent grid. So, it needed to adhere to the very strict health and safety and guidelines that EDM adhere to. Generators came in on June 10th. Bear in mind, we're coming online on July 1st. Then the testing and commissioning, and again sign off by the host utility as an IPP that's part of the network. And then we did the project inauguration on July 18th. So as boils down to about 110 power plant and permanent power station, permanent substation, transformers, etc., all commissioned in less than 4 months, basically. It's quite a challenge. The inauguration, just some nice slides here. That's the President of Mozambique on the left, with the Minister of Energy behind him, blessing a tree on site with the local chief of Rosana Garcia. It's Rupert Soames, our CEO, giving, again, the President and the Minister of Energy a tour around the plant. Cyril Ramaphosa, the chairman of Shanduka, our BE partner, handing a shovel over to, I think that's the Minister of Education. We did an Adopt a School program as part of the project CSR program, and that's a symbol of foundations of education in Mozambique. And this picture, I think it really sums up the project. You have the President of Mozambique there, meeting and shaking hands with the CEO of Eskom, the CEO of EDM, CEO or chairperson of Shanduka, Cyril Ramaphosa, our CEO Rupert Soames in the background there, and the Minister of the UK Minister of Africa in the background there. And it really shows, I think, the cross-border and relationships that came together to make this project happen. So, what are some of the project development? What were some of the things we needed to consider to make sure this project was a success? All of these sound really simple as well. When you look at it as standalone, they all sound really simple, but it was absolutely key to how we went about doing it. I think the first one was listening to our customers and the need. And we did a kind of an evaluation of the market and the prevailing conditions. And it's very obvious that with the incredible economic growth that's going on in Mozambique and sub-Saharan Africa generally, there's a fantastic infrastructure, transmission infrastructure network, and some of these power plants are still, some of the permanent power plants are still being commissioned. So there was a need for an interim IPP type solution. The fundamentals of your business plan. I mean, Aggreko has always been, we have a reputation of doing fast-track interim power solutions, but an interim IPP power solution is much more complex, and it was required here. And we had to take a look at our what the project and the requirements and make sure it was in line with our core values and our core strengths. And we decided it was, and then pushed ahead. Don't focus on the challenges, focus on the solutions. I think, and something I'm incredibly proud of with the Aggreko Africa team is that kind of can-do attitude of working out how we overcome any challenges rather than just focusing on what the issues are, was absolutely essential throughout the entire project. And I'd almost say this is the most important point. There were far greater risks for us in the project, being an IPP. Not only the contractual risks of taking on gas contracts, take-or-pay gas contracts, but also reputationally. We had made a commitment to Eskom and EDM. We're very proud of the fact we deliver on what we promise, and we knew if we let down Eskom and EDM, that was going to have repercussions for the countries of South Africa and Mozambique. And right at the beginning, we spent a long time actually identifying all of the potential risks that were involved in the project. And by doing that, we were able to plan and manage and basically minimize those risks throughout. Plan A is fine. What happens if things don't go to plan, which often does happen, particularly in a project as complex and involving so many different parties as this one. And our commissioning director, he was absolutely fantastic. And he showed me about 2 or 3 months before we were, COD date, all of the actions and the time scales that were required to make sure we hit that COD date. And then next to each one of those, he had a mitigating measure for what would happen if Plan A didn't go according to plan. And it was only by kind of planning all of those what-if scenarios that we were ready for any changes or challenges that were thrown up along the way. And something we took on again, and it was quite a brave decision, was to make sure we kept our customers informed. The power industry, as we all know, is actually quite a small community. And with so many parties involved and complexities, it was obvious right at the beginning that things were going to change and things weren't going to go 100% according to plan throughout the development of the project. And we took the decision right at the beginning to make sure it was us that were telling our customer that right at, even if we didn't know what the answer was, but we'd certainly tell them what the issue was and we were working on it. And I think really by making sure our customer knew that we were on top of what the issues were. And yes, there were some tough conversations along the way, but I think it helped give our customers kind of the confidence that we were able to overcome. We knew what the problems were, we were able to overcome it. And I think on that note, I'd really like to take the opportunity to thank Eskom and EDM, because without their understanding throughout the contract period and their support, this project just wouldn't have happened. They were excellent customers to work with. And CSR, it is integral. I mean, we were working with Shanduka. We put into plan a very strict localization of both spend and recruitment, on-site training, off-site training, local employment, as you can imagine, and then a CSR adopt-a-school program that was, again, reflecting the cross-border project. There are 365 schools in South Africa, and this is the first time it was taken cross-border. And we actually built all of that into our PPA. So we had a contractual commitment to deliver again on what we had promised. And again, I'd like to thank Shanduka and our local partner in Mozambique, Msumbiji, for their support. It really was a team effort. Just a couple of testimonials from from the CEOs of Eskom and EDM there. And then from Brian Dharmas at Eskom. And, ladies and gents, that's about it. I mean, I hope that's given a bit of an overview, a bit of a taster of the project. Very innovative, complex, and 4 months was all we had to do it in. So it's an achievement that, as a company, we're incredibly proud of. And yeah, thank you very much. Any questions, please?
Do you have any questions? We'll start off.